But I first really wanted to ask how many of you have used or worked with teen dating violence and used curriculums or went into the schools or have done activities with teens.
Dana from Native Project, and I did one presentation with our youth treatment group in one of their groups, and that's the only thing I've done so far.
Great.
This is Donna Henry out here in Unalaska, Alaska, and we have a Suicide Prevention Youth Coalition that we regularly work with in the community and with kids on healthy relationships. And the behavioral health team here, we've done quite a bit with the school system on healthy relationships and teen violence.
That's wonderful. So thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, this is Cheyenne Boston with Indian Health Council, and I did a curriculum with teen dating violence prevention. It's a workbook for Native girls, and we just got one sent in to address the teen dating violence for boys also now in the school system.
Great. And do you know what curriculum that you use?
Yeah, it's the Native American Women's Health Education Resource Center. There's a picture of a butterfly, and it's a purple workbook for the girls. And the other one is Little Lizards for the boys, and it's a blue workbook.
Great. And that's one of the curriculums I have as a resource at the end of the slides today. But I was not aware of the boys one.
Yeah, I was shocked to see that it actually just got created, I believe, maybe this year, and we just got the material sent over to us. So I haven't actually went in and delivered it yet. I'm still reviewing it, but it seems amazing.
Great. So one of the things I think when we think of prevention, you know, I'm wondering what you all think prevention really, what is the core of prevention? What is it? When we look at prevention, it's preventative education, classroom presentations, and those should also include, if possible, elders. I know for some of my background, I've always, in the last 12 years, I've always worked with children or youth, you know, teens, and was able to fit that in somewhere along the line throughout my last 12 years. And I always tried to include elders as much as I could. And many times they just, you know, joined me there and were there to step in once in a while, or if there was questions maybe that I couldn't answer that were more traditional questions.
The conference has been muted.
And so, you know, we include some of those elders to help us out in answering some of the traditional ways that they might have grown up. When we think of prevention, we also want to look at a whole systems change. So we look at the school policies. And what are some of the policies that are in place for sexual harassment, for domestic violence, for some of the verbal abuse. I know we have a lot of students name calling. I know one school that I was at, they had said, I get called names all the time, and the derogatory names in the hallways. Yep, teachers hear it. Nope, they don't do anything about it. And so really, even if there is a policy in place, is it being enforced? And why are the teachers not stepping in, during those times in between classes? So those are things that you want to look at. You also want to provide some parent education, whether it's sending back, if you're in a school setting, if you're sending information to the parents or in the school newsletter about a certain topic, you can do it that way. You sometimes need to be a little bit creative as far as how you're doing that. I know I use the school newsletter quite often, and now some of them are on the internet as well. So you can do it that way. Or even the local newspaper. A lot of tribes have their own papers now that come out monthly. Those, you can utilize those to educate the community. And then talking circles with victims for support groups. So part of the prevention is the education, but you also need to have in place support for that education. You can't provide support groups, or you can't provide education without having a resource available for them, such as a support group or talking circles. And also, one of you had mentioned that there is a boys curriculum, which I think is wonderful. I have boys myself, and we know that more times than not, they are the perpetrators and they are the aggressors, predominant aggressors. But I believe when they're teens, when they're youth, they have an opportunity to turn that around, to turn behavior around, because we know that it's learned education. And we know that that's all learned behaviors. And so they can, if they learn it, they can unlearn it. And so having those talking circles and the support groups for some of those perpetrators are vital, especially for teens. I believe it was, I had went to a workshop several years back, and it was a Dr. David Walsh, and he had presented on the youth brain development. And I believe it was either 21 or 25 years old before your brain is fully developed. And the last part of the development of your brain is the consequence piece. And so, teenagers don't think of consequences. So that's important to remember. But youth have a chance to turn around. If they're heading the wrong direction, they just need the right leadership and support in place. Also, who do teens look at when they are looking for support, they look at each other. They look at each other, they talk with each other, they go to their best friends, hey, this happened, that happened. So they go to one another. So having that team leadership is also important if you have the opportunity to do so. One of the things that I did in the county that I came from, it was split up in 5 different sections. And so I had 5 different schools, and I thought, how am I going to get all of the youth in this entire county on the same page at the same time? And so one of the things that I did was, and I'll go into this a little bit further, but I was able to pull the 47 students together within 3 months, and we ended up renting a bus and taking it down to the state capitol to talk with legislators. So, and I'll get into that because I think that's important. But those 47 teens throughout the county were able to impact each of those schools, and more so than what I was able to. They were also able to pull in the younger students. So as the 11th and 12th graders left the school, they had mentored other younger people. And I'm sure many of you do this as well, incorporate teachings into your activities, whether it's making a medicine bag or a dream catcher or a medicine wheel, some of those things. Those are things that I've done one-on-one with students, and I've also done them in groups. And then I think defining what honorable really truly is. I think we say the word a lot, along with the word respect, and but nobody's doing it. And so I think spending a little bit of time with youth on those 2 words, honorable and respect, is also important. So prevention is preventive education in many different ways. And so you want to look at what are some of the core issues. What do you need to know before you educate? What's happening in your community, in your area? Is their technology widely available? Do they all have cell phones? Are they texting each other? Are they harassing each other over the web or through text messages? And what are the responses by the violence by other peers and adults? So like the example that I gave you with the teachers not stepping in and stopping those students from even simple name calling. It's not so simple when you're told it every day. And I think we all are very aware of bullying, and we know the results. We have one of you online, if not more, has suicide prevention funding as well. So, those are all things that are leading up to it. So you want to look at what the responses to the violence is by other peers and adults. And then I'm not sure if you were able to review the Teen Dating Violence Focus Group report. It was by the Department of Justice Tribal Youth Leadership Summit. And that was held in New Mexico, July of 2010. And I'm going to go over that in just a moment here. And I wanted just to end this section with you that you already know what the solutions are. It's amazing when I had went with our teen group, how quickly they pulled together and with some of the tools that, simple tools that we provided for them, and they ran with it. And we'll, like I said, we'll move into that a little bit. So just bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and just talk briefly about the report. And that is one of the attachments that you will be receiving after this web training. Let's see. The U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program hosted a Tribal Youth Summit at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, July 2010. More than 110 American Indian and Alaska Native youth were represented in representing 21 tribal communities from across the nation. The Tribal Youth Summit hosted a wide array of speakers and activities for youth to engage in. Tribal leadership, elders were all involved in many facets of the summit, including special informational sessions and American Indian, Alaska Native cultural presentations. So the Office of Violence Against Women saw an opportunity to collect information from tribal youth attending the Youth Leadership Summit about teen dating violence. So we were one of the programs. Red Wind Consulting was one of the programs that participated in this facilitation. And there was general sessions and surveys were conducted during the summit. There was 5 concurrent sessions that were titled Healthy Teen Dating Relationships, Respecting and Honoring Your Voice was one of them. Time during each of the sessions were reserved for youth participation, and chaperones were asked to withhold from participating to enable full participation from the youth. And the general session we had was titled Speak Up, Speak Out. You talk, we listen. So that was just some of what we had discussed. In addition, we had asked them to think about healthy relationships they have seen either in their family or their community, and very few of the youth could identify one. And one youth had commented that sometimes healthy ones end abusive. They start out good, then they get, love and trust them, and then it goes bad. So, we really need to listen to what our youth are saying before we start talking. And because we don't know what it is that where they're at. And so asking them their questions is also part of honoring where they're at and respecting where they're at. And you talked about the different kinds of abuse they've seen in their own communities. Many had experienced experiences that they could draw from, having seen a sister or a friend being abused. They identified a detailed list of behaviors and tactics used to abuse or control girlfriends and boyfriends that were occurring in their own school. So, given the opportunity for them to sit back and think about those things and to have those discussions, we don't always need to tell them where they have those answers, but we just need to pull that out of them. In particular, it was evident how the youth lives had become more public through the use of technology, and they identified ways technology is used in relationships, and through the use of technology, the problems happening in the relationships were so much more public. And they were also asked about resources they had in their communities and that they thought would be important in promoting healthy dating relationships and addressing the dating violence in their community. And there was two major themes that emerged from that. And one addressed alcohol and drug issues, and the other they wanted to create a safe place for them to gather. So the drug and alcohol-related responses, they wanted to have drug and alcohol education for youth, enforce the laws, in particular drinking and driving. So those were the main responses for that. And then for the safe place for youth, they talked about a safe house for the town for youth to go to when things get tough. Building where kids can hang out with activities, a place to get away, to get my mind off things was a comment, where there was a computer, a swimming pool. Also having someone to talk to, someone that can be trusted, and someone that will hold information confidential. The teens also talked about wanting to be able to choose who would be helpful, someone that was not going to tell them to straighten up. They wanted someone that they could connect with. Other suggestions provided by the youth included the need for better law enforcement. It says law enforcement that takes action. One group wanted abandoned buildings to be torn down because, as they state, these are places where the violence takes place. So, some of these are things that we already know, but now we know that they know this as well. And I just want to commend some of the programs, some of the DVPI programs that I'm aware of that have these things in place right now. I want to say thank you, and I know that's a lot of work and difficult to set some of those guidelines and boundaries. I know the one place that I'd recently visited up in Alaska, they had a home. The DVPI program utilized it, but they had one of the resource centers in town opened up their house. They had rented a big house, and they made a section, a kitchen, like a kitchen and living room type, and an art area for youth to come after school. And so from after school until 9 o'clock at night, they were able to hang out there. And that was supervised. You know, they had adults there interacting with them, but, you know, it was a place for them. It was their own. And I know students really, they said they get about 30 kids, you know, throughout the week. And not every day it was packed, but majority of the days that was where the students hung out. And so it was healthy. There was no drinking, there was no smoking, there was no violence, you know, that sort of thing. It was a safe place for them. One of the other things that they talked about was self-respect in the classes for both boys and girls. Many of them identified respecting each other and honesty, being open and honest was important for them. One of the questions that we had asked was, what kind of abuse do you see in your own school, community, or within your tribe? And some of the comments was that he hits her when she tried to break up with him, dude beating on a chick, calling names, verbal abuse. There's supposed to be trust, but there isn't. They go to different boys and girls cheating on each other, and that's part of respect. You know, respecting one another. And cheating is, of course, not respecting the other partner. Facebook postings, texting nasty messages when they get mad. My friend stopped talking to me because I was getting mad at him. So this sounds like a person who wasn't treating the boyfriend very well, and the friend stepped up and said, hey, that's not okay, and quit talking to that friend, that person. Doesn't let her drive her own car. He'll walk up and take her cell phone away from her. So that was just some of it. And there was from the Crow Creek, a student from the Crow Creek Reservation had talked about her role in a program called Peers Helping Peers, and friends talking about suicide and helping youth prevent suicide. She also talked about volunteering at the Project Safe Women's Shelter. You know, so students were getting involved. If they have the opportunity and the resources, I know in all of the areas that I have lived, transportation has been an issue, especially for youth. And so I know there was, in the one area that I was in, they did have a bus after school for after-school activities. Students that were in sports and after-school activities were able to ride this activity bus, and it would leave at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So when we had our meetings, when I met with the youth groups, usually it was at the school, and then they could ride that bus home if they didn't have other transportation. One youth also shared that he started a youth council in the community that collected and brought in youth point of view, and he brought it to the tribal council. So, you know, that is what social change is about. Youth facilitators then asked youth participants to identify things that you hear about youth talking when they want to be involved in, and identify some things that they would want to go home and start getting involved in with their communities. And they talked about a recreational center, youth council for each community, getting teens involved in talking about problems and how to change them. One idea was shared and got interest from multiple youth was starting a teen court and having youth face their peers when they are involved in criminal activity. So that was almost like the restorative justice that some of us talk about. Taking advantage of the radio stations and dancing, having tribal dances, community dances, it was important to them. And teaching younger children how to dance some of the traditional dances. So, starting a mentor group and having teens mentor kids who have older siblings or older youth available to them. So I want to stop just for a moment, and I wanted to see if anyone had any questions or comments at this point.
This is Donna in Unalaska, and someone at the start mentioned that there was a Native American curriculum for girls and boys, but I didn't quite get the name, and I was wondering if they wouldn't mind sharing that again.
Yes, actually I have that. That is one of the last PowerPoints that I have. So you will get a copy of the PowerPoint, so you can take the PowerPoints off of and the information from our PowerPoints.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, that was, and that was actually the Native American Women's Health Education Resource Center, and that was in South Dakota. So, like I said, I have a couple resources for you at the end of the PowerPoint that will have that contact information and some of what the curriculum is about. So I'm going to move ahead to organizing a teen leadership group. We realized that teens listen to other teens. And so having that group that can support and help with the outreach services is only going to strengthen that even more. I think, what I seen when I went into the one community, I had lived there for a while. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't dealt with for many reasons. And so when I started going to the groups, what I did was I went to the schools. I went to where the youth were congregating. I went to the health classes in some of the specialty groups. In one of the areas they had Students Against Destructive Decisions, which was called short for SAD. And I spoke with them and told them, this is what I want to do. I'd really, this is the program that I work for. Explained about our program and what we did, working with survivors and victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and that we also realize that teens fall into these categories as well, and we wanted to be there for them, and we wanted to figure out the best way that we could support teens in this. And so one of the things that information that you'll need to know before you go and talk with those specialty groups or the schools, or I know many of you also have as we did, we had a youth group where kids could go to the community center after school until I think 7 p.m., so similar to that place in Alaska. But it was at the community center, and they had adults there, and they could play basketball there and all those things. So I had went there a couple times too and talked with them. So I didn't have my notes attached to this. But information that you need to know before going into the classroom. What do you want to accomplish? What do you ultimately want? You want them to have healthy relationships with friends and adults and partners. You want them to live a violence-free life. And what is one of the questions that we want to keep asking ourselves? What and why? And so what are you going to be doing with the group? Your first meeting will be longer. You'll talk more in depth about sexual assault and domestic violence and teen dating violence. You may want to brainstorm ideas about outreach, but you really want to enforce that this is their group, and really they're going to make it what they want. You also want to be an advocate. Let them know that the topics some may be difficult. These are all things that you're going to talk about during your presentation. Statistics, local statistics that you have, share a story. One of the things that we did, we brought the entire high school and middle school, they were combined, together in the auditorium and had a half-a-day lyceum is what they called it. But during that time, we had law enforcement officer there who talked about consequences, consequences of domestic violence and sexual assault. We had the prosecutor there that also talked about some cases. We had an advocate there, and we had a survivor there as well. And one of the survivors shared their story. And during that time that she was sharing her story, you could hear a pin drop in that arena. Students were just so focused and so quiet during that time. So I encourage you to share stories, even if you don't have, the person there to share their story. But sharing a story that you might have worked with someone, you have to also be very careful of confidentiality, and sometimes You don't need to even say a person's name, and everybody knows who it is because of the subject. So be very careful with that. But sharing stories, youth really attach to that. And then, encourage their participation. Let them know they have, each of them have something unique to bring to the table. And so it's important that they attend this group. It's important that they come to this group. So these are all things that you're going to be sharing, when you're trying to gather that youth group. You may have come up with how often you're going to meet, once a month or biweekly. So let them know this is how often, this is where, this is when we're going to meet for the first time. If you have parent information together, you want to pass that out along with an application. And I have examples of those in just a moment. And like I said, at that first meeting, it's going to be a little bit longer. I think mine was 2 to 3 hours. And I wouldn't go more than that, absolutely not. And I think I had about 20 teens at that time. We got pizza, we got pop, and we started working through some of this. And so what we did initially was we defined the difference between assault and abuse. You want to arm them with tools and the right education, the right facts before they go out. So we talked about the differences between assault and abuse. We made up some rules during this time as far as being respectful when someone else is talking, confidentiality during this time, no derogatory words, We defined respect because that was one of the things that always comes up. And we talked about how we're going to make decisions. What our decision-making process was going to be as a group. I also let them know that I was a mandated reporter and explained to them what that was, and letting them know that that there was certain things and laws that I needed to abide by. And so I explained that to them as well. And I do have, I think I attached it. I don't think it's on my PowerPoint, but I have a flow chart of the mandated report for you. We talked about a meeting place to make sure that the meeting place was appropriate and easily accessed by the students. Again, then I collected or handed out any other applications or parent information. And then we discussed the issues that they've seen in their community and in their school. And then this is the application that we had come up with. Oh, they came up with a name as well during that first meeting. And they called it TADA, Teens Against Dating Abuse. TADA. And so they were so creative. But the application really is for you to have emergency contact information, but also to get to know them a little bit. So we asked just some basic questions, why they were interested in it, what do they hope to learn or accomplish from it? And then describe yourself in 3 words. And found out what some of their hobbies or interests were. And then you always want to ask if they have any special needs, if they're diabetic or hearing impaired or any physical needs. This was a sample of the letter that we gave to the students that went out to the parents. That we were just, you feel free to copy and duplicate these things. Just make sure you're putting your program's name in there. But make sure your program's name is in there. We're inviting you to participate in a regular monthly meeting, so we're letting them know how often it's going to be and what we're going to do. We're going to work on outreach activities on education for teen dating violence. When will the meetings be held? Where will they be held? In the school, room 212, the first Monday of every month from 4 to 6. So make sure all of your information is in here. And then the one thing that I didn't put in, you'll want to have signatures at the bottom, of course, but you also want to put in your contact information to the parents so that they have that available for you as well. And some of the parents came the first couple times to kind of see what it was about themselves, because some of them don't. One of the areas I worked in, this particular area was non-native, but it was a very religious area, and there was many churches in the area. And so parents were worried that I was going to be encouraging them to date or encouraging them to have sex or these sorts of things. So, be prepared for some of that depending on the area that you're in. Our second meeting with the youth group, we came up with a mission statement because we wanted all of our outreach activities to stay focused, that teens would be, whenever we did something, we wanted to ask ourselves, okay, what will we accomplish by doing this? Is this going to meet part of our mission statement? And it was the mission of TDA to prevent teen dating violence by using trained volunteers, peer volunteers, to provide outreach education and accurate information on the issues relating to teen dating violence. So that was pretty simple. The other thing that we talked about was some of the goals. So this was really much like writing a grant, maybe, a grant application. And this gave them some of those skills as well. So we came up with goals. And like I said, you'll all get copies of this PowerPoint. But this particular one was from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, to give young people a sense of personal accountability related to teen dating violence, increase understanding, provide young people with skills to communicate about the violence, consent, and refusal. And then this was handouts that when I do work with students and youth, we talk about relationship warning signs. So feel free to duplicate and copy any of these humiliates you or criticizes you in front of others, destroys personal property or sentimental items. So feel free to alter this to your area especially. And this was the last part of that relationship warning signs, where we explained if you find yourself saying yes to any of these questions, you could be involved in an abusive relationship. Give your contact number and your information or information that will support them. And there is actually a National Teen Dating Violence 800 hotline. It's an 800 number. And I have no idea what I did with it because I wanted to put it in here, so I apologize for that. But I will make sure to get that for you. Otherwise, feel free to Google National Teen Dating Violence Hotline, and you should come up with that. There used to be a Native Teen Dating Violence Hotline that was based out of St. Paul Women of Nations. That program, they had a 24-hour hotline where other youth called in, but it's my understanding that their funding is no longer in place, so I don't believe that program exists. But that was through Minnesota and St. Paul, Minnesota, and it was Women of Nations that had that Native teen violence hotline. One of the other handouts is differences between flirting and harassment. And then one of the questions that I always like to ask the students, list the people in your life that have helped you feel good about yourself. And I use this with adults as well. And then I ask them what it was that they did that helped them to feel good about themselves. And then I also ask, after you're done presenting and working with the group, whether it's a classroom or whatever it is, ask them to name one thing that they will do or one thing they'll do differently from now on and why. And this gets them to think about the next step and how will they react when they hear derogatory words, in the hallway, or someone being shoved, shoving a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That'll help them to think ahead a little bit. This is one of the things that always came up, was what teens can do to help a friend, because that was the biggest thing that came up in our Tada group, was how do we help our friends? Well, remind them that they may not have all the answers, but they have resources, and that they should be referring them to the program, to the advocacy program, or to the school counselor, or to an elder. But initially they need to believe, respect, accept, and listen to them, and really care about what they're saying. So some of the basics, but they don't need to know all of the answers, and they're not going to have the answers. Bill of Rights is, Dating Bill of Rights is one of the things that I hand out, and I'll have students sign that, and they keep that for themselves. But this is really that they have the right not to act macho or seductive. and they have the right to ask if they want physical closeness or not. And they have the right to say no at any time. And I know I had, with the group with the 47 teens that I had, we had met separately during some of the time, and we had met as an entire group. And during one of those meetings where we had the entire group there, I had brought in law enforcement. And they talked about, they were able to ask questions, ask the officer different questions. And one of them said, what if, you're making out and you've talked about sex and you thought you wanted it, but you get to the point where you don't want it. What's the cutoff that you can't say no anymore? And the officer's response was, I don't care if you're laying naked in bed with that other person. If you say no at any time, you have that right. And if they proceed, then it becomes assault. So, that fine line and that boundary was important for the students to know. And this was another portion of it, that they will talk with a trusted adult or boyfriend if their boyfriend or girlfriend is not being respectful to them, so that they will reach out. So I try to get youth to sign off on this for themselves. And finally, I know we're going a little bit over. This is one of the resources, the curriculum that was talked about earlier. And this is Native specific. And it talks about self-esteem, setting and enforcing boundaries, warning signs, escaping a violent situation safely, gender stereotyping, self-care, recognizing healthy relationships, legal rights, healing from dating violence. Very good resource. It also has a facilitator's guide and then the workbook for the teen girls, and as it sounded like, a workbook for the teen boys now as well. Other resources were, one more here. Oh, the safe dates. This was really, really great. It's SAMHSA approved. I believe it was like 9 to 14 sessions, like 40-minute sessions or 50-minute sessions. And I went into the health class during these sessions. And this particular curriculum goes step by step. There's like no brain work involved. However, where your brain work comes in is when the students are responding to you and asking you questions. You really want to be on your toes when you're working with some of these curriculums. So there's a website as well for you to get in touch. And then some of the resources that I have attached was the report by the Department of Justice Tribal Youth Leadership Summit, the flow chart that I had talked about, that was by the Victims' Right Law Center, and school responsibilities, the fact sheet by the U.S. Department of Education. It's the federal guidelines. I believe it talks about that how each of the school needs to have sexual harassment policy in place, etc. And then a teen dating violence wheel, and that was by the National Center on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault.